who's here. So before going into item number 2 in the work session, I know that I think Councilmember Hogaman, maybe you've already covered your TARPO comment. You don't need to add that to the work session, I think. Is there anything else you want to add to the work session?
I'm happy to discuss. I'm not quite sure what else we would need to discuss.
I don't think we do.
No.
Yeah.
No, okay.
So we don't need to do that. Pat, you wanted to talk a little bit about
Well, I thought
the members. We'll get under other business. I just wanted to add just a couple items.
I'll have a few things under other work
Right,
session
under other
business.
work session. And Lydia, anything you want to add to discuss tonight under the work session, other business?
Well, I saw this proclamation, and yes, I do want to add something about a state proclamation with Olmsted, because I found some really
Oh,
cool
good.
language in here.
Yeah, and I'm going to update everybody on the Marshall letter as well. Just so we have a couple of comments from council members under the other work session business tonight as we get to that item number 4. But we'll begin with number 2, which is a discussion of the downtown customer parking program. Mr. Batten is in front of us. Jeff, thank you for your work and the material you were able to send around. Obviously, some of our residents also took advantage of that circulation. Please proceed.
Okay, well, this is a continuation from our customer parking initiative concept for downtown. So this was kind of the next step based on the last meeting we had where we identified the potential spaces for customer parking or customer-oriented parking. And so the next steps thereafter were to draft a letter that we would hold until we were ready to distribute. Also to think and come up with some kind of terminology on the signage itself. And so you see that in your packet. I also included a photograph of kind of what those signs would look like. That's a photograph of one of our existing downtown signs. And then there was, in addition with the letter, there was kind of a map showing the highlighted areas of the preferred employee parking around the downtown, and just kind of a note with a circle in there about, a 0 to 3 minute walk from those outskirts. So trying to indicate that the walking distance is really not, that far in reality. After circulating the agenda item, I did hear from Lydia with a couple of suggestions for the letter. John, I think you also reached out to me today with just one comment. And we've heard other comments tonight from notably Mr. Nash related to the letter and the sign, wording on the sign itself. So what I hope to walk away with tonight is some type of consensus on letter changes that you'd like to see, and some type of consensus on the wording on the sign itself, so that we may move forward with, if we are in fact going to go that direction, ordering the signposts, because I'm sure they're going to take a while to get here. We order those from a company out of Texas, and so they have to be kind of put together and sent to us. I would anticipate that what we would intend to do is ensure that once the signs were here and we were ready to install them, then the letter would go out and the signs would go up, and it would kind of be all one nice, neat, quick package. I wouldn't want there to be the signs to get ahead of the letter, or the letter to get too far ahead of the sign. So I think it would be more advantageous for us to try to make sure that those happen in a very short time frame in sequence with the letter, and then the signs right afterwards. That would at least be my suggestion. So with that, if you have additional comment or suggestions related to the letter, I'm not sure how you want to proceed with that. I would mention that Lydia had made 2 comments. One was at the very last sentence of paragraph 2, where it says, surely a 3-minute walk starts that way, that maybe we remove that. And then in the 3rd paragraph, where it says, please set the example, I think Lydia's comment was maybe we encourage you to set the example was some wordsmithing there. John, you had also mentioned, and I originally had not necessarily intended in my mind at least to include the map where the signs would be, but I believe that would be an addition that you'd like to see, and it would be easily inserted probably at the end of the first sentence on paragraph 2, somewhere right in there with maybe see attached map. I've got to do some work on the map in terms of retitling it and that kind of thing, because what I brought to you guys were options. And so those would be the things that I would like to try to walk away with, though, tonight, if we can, so that we can move forward on sign ordering again, if, unless, based on comments, that there's a slightly different direction that you want to go with the signs specifically,
Yeah.
as Mr. Nash indicated.
Well, from my point of view, I think this is, as you just said, generally the direction we want to go, maybe very specifically. So I'm very happy we're moving forward on this. I don't think we want to wordsmith the letter here, but I do think the direction of the letter, the tone of the letter, some correction ideas, which some of the public made tonight, the council, maybe we need to talk about that just a little bit, and then Jeff and I can go and write a letter and circulate it back for everyone's
I mean,
approval.
and this was a start point, obviously.
Yeah,
Obviously, just to give you a starting point for conversation. Certainly can be trashed and started all over, but, or we can, John, as you say, I mean, I would envision, John, your signature being on here and then the rest of the council members listed
Right.
in terms of just how it would set up. So
Right. Well,
if it's going to have your signature on it, you might want to have some of your language in there.
Well, with respect to the letter, and thoughts that council may have brought into this meeting, let alone what we may have heard from the public tonight, are there any parts of the letter that are misleading or lead one to the wrong conclusion, either about the sign or the purpose of the parking plan itself? Maybe one idea might be, I'll just go individually, and if you have particular thoughts about the letter first, let's deal with that, and then we can talk about the time frame, how this is going to be rolled out, what the cost would be. But Lydia, your thoughts on the letter? You've made a couple of them, circulated them around already. Any others on that?
And the reasons for mine, I thought the sentence, surely a 3-minute walk, if I were reading that, I might be a little insulted, like, well, don't tell me, don't make judgment about a 3-minute walk to me, so that's why I took it out. And then the other one where it say, please set the example, we really don't have the authority to tell them to set an example. So I thought we could encourage them rather than saying please. I mean, that was a simple change. But I guess we need to talk about the letter, but my bigger question that I think we need to talk about is how do we enforce, to Jim Nash's point, how do we enforce the shop owners who comply for a week and then don't comply anymore? And that's been an issue all along. I remember at one point, Catherine, I believe you might have said to me, if you can't enforce it, then don't do it. So how do we enforce it? And I think that we've got to discuss this.
Okay, let's do that. But again, from the
Letter
letter's
first.
point of view, are there substantive changes or directional changes beyond what you've mentioned, and we'll go around and see what others may have?
Nothing to the letter.
But there's certainly issues of the timing, the signage, the enforcement issue that we need to discuss. Pat, anything on the letter, anything you'd like to see a little different?
I agree with Lydia's 2 letter suggestions there, about just language-wise. I thought signage itself, I thought Jim Nash had a good suggestion there.
Changing the word to reserved.
Yeah, I thought, that hit me once as he said it, I said, oh, yeah. I guess I'm assuming this because I looked at it in the photo. These will be permanently placed in the ground.
Yes.
Okay, the reason, and I say that for 2 reasons. One, I think it also gives it more of a sense of authority than something that's not permanently in the ground. And 2, I did have one shopkeeper pull me aside yesterday and said the wind had knocked over one of the ones signing there, and they were nervous. It didn't hurt anybody, but they
Yep.
said, it could have. So that solves that issue. So,
Yeah, these are permanently mounted. They'll be buried 2 feet in
and
the ground with
it also
concrete.
struck me as that are in comportment with the rest of our signage, so that we look.
Yeah, and we
thought
wanted to
out well.
maintain,
So
obviously.
you did a
yeah,
good job there.
Maintain the
That's my
continuity.
only comments on that part. I do think the rollout is very important, because I think we've got the, sort of the right tools here, but we really do need to figure out a good way, the best way we can to roll it out, both with shopkeepers and owners downtown, as well as residents in general, so that we don't get a surprise blowback. I mean, there's always going to be critics, but I just think we can.
Jane? Jane, any comments on the letter, and we'll get to the other points too.
Jeff, you've been here and you know the people in the downtown better than I do. I mean, do you think it's going to work?
But the entire program, is that what you mean, Jane?
I think the examples that Jim Nash mentioned earlier, where there's good intentions initially, but those good intentions go awry one day, and then the next day they happen to go again, and then it becomes falling back into the same habit of parking where they choose to, without some way of enforcing an ordinance of some sort. And I do not know that there is any way legally or otherwise possible to carve out one segment of public and say they cannot use public parking in this location, but allow other components of the public to use those spaces. I don't see how that is going to doable, honestly.
Is putting a time limit
That
on
was,
parking
that was a
lawful?
discussion that we had.
That's lawful? I know we talked
That's
about
lawful
it.
because it would apply to all,
Yep,
shoppers and employees.
right. I think this is well-meaning. I don't have any further comments on the letter, but I just wonder, as Lydia said, and Pat said, and Jim Nash said, whether it's going to work.
Yeah. It's going to rain tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday, and
It's going to rain?
it's going to rain tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday, and I
Right.
can assure you that employees are going to want to park as close to their front door as they can. That's just human nature, unfortunately.
I just, one, related to what you said, I don't think the likelihood that we might not be able to see this succeed should prevent us from doing what we're doing. I think this is an earnest effort to try to rein in this problem. And I think we can, after it's in place, I think then we can look at some sort of the possibilities of additional ordinance or some enforcement mechanism. I don't think we should not do anything because it might not work.
I do have, I have a feeling that the parking spaces that say reserved for to dine, shop, visit, probably would, for the most part, be generally observed by the employees. I do have a concern, and I had one before coming in here tonight, and Jim Nash pointed it out, the same one I have is, does it appear that these are the only customer parking spaces, and therefore for employees, everything else is fair game? And so we're asking the employees to park in the outer edges and then designating, reserved parking for shopping, dining, and visiting. Does that send a message to the employees that it's okay to then therefore park right beside one of these parking spaces that have that sign? I don't know that, I don't know what will ultimately happen, but I can envision that as being a distinct possibility, that they might respect these 24 spaces, but I don't know that they'll respect parking in outer edge.
Would we be better off to start with, rather than reserved for these types of activities, signs that said 1 hour parking or 2 hour parking or whatever, so that then if people were not complying with them, at least we could say, all right, now we're going to adopt an ordinance that there'll be a fine or something.
There's two components that I see with that. One is if, and I'm not sure I've fully understood your comment, if you really wanted to try to affect employee parking long-term in downtown, one of the items that we discussed when Chief Webb and myself were here was the timed parking, putting restrictions on the amount of time. The other option was paid parking, which I think we all kind of quickly moved out away from that and wanted to have a little bit more of a softer approach, I think was kind of one of the terms that were used at that time. If we were trying to blanket the village with that, that means pretty much almost every parking space is going to have a sign in the territory specific that we designated as 2-hour parking. And that would be required for the ordinance to be enforceable, and a fine actually to be levied and collected. Then there is the question of the fine. Is the fine level, the amount, sufficient to be a deterrent? And as the current ordinance is written, it is not. It's $5. And that has some tie back to general statutes. There is a way to work around that with a change in the ordinance that decriminalizes and takes it out of the penal system and makes it a municipal fine. But we run into the same problem potentially with that we do with people who don't mow their yard or grass, in that, it's a fine, but in order to collect, we would have to take them to court, and there's a cost associated with that. So collection of that it can be done, but it comes at a cost.
Okay, well, if we were to, right now, we're proposing to start out with a request situation and appeal to people's higher natures, and ask them to please leave at least the 24 spaces and maybe more than that for visitors and patrons. But if they don't, then we don't have anything, and we can't do an enforcement action, as if I'm understanding you correctly. If instead of that, if that's really the case, could maybe start with, again, a request to not park longer than 1 hour or 2 hours or whatever we decide the time would be. We could have a permanent sign that said, 2-hour parking here to corner, right? You don't have to put one in front of every single parking space. And then, if the request didn't work, and there's going to be a certain amount of slop in the system, but if we got, like less than 70% cooperation or whatever, then we could look into doing an enforcement ordinance, because we can enforce for timing.
And we can. And, the
Jeff,
latter half of
can you
those
speak up a little
comments-
bit, Jeff?
Yeah,
Might
I'm
have
sorry.
before that we didn't want to do the enforcement for timing because it was expensive in and of itself and awkward and a lot of work, but.
And effectiveness is questionable.
Right, but at least it's out there, it's a possibility, whereas for this, I guess it's not a possibility.
Have something in place now as far as a fine, but you just said it's de minimis. Is that
Yeah,
what I
well,
hear you
yeah,
say?
we have that, but what we don't have is right now a timed parking. That section of the ordinance is basically a holdover from back at the time that we had timed parking. And we do still have the ability for the loading and unloading to write a ticket there, but that's what the fine would be.
Jeff Morgan, I haven't called on you yet. Would you have any comments on the letter part and this issue?
Number one, the letter, I concur with the wordsmithing that Lydia has proposed. Number two, on the signs, I agree with Jim Nash on changing that. Number three, I agree with Pat Pizzella in the idea that I think it's appropriate to move forward with this, that recognizing we don't necessarily have an enforcement process. Four, when we're talking about the enforcement in the past, the message I got from it was cost prohibitive. you're talking about 24 parking spaces. If you've got 240 parking spaces, it's probably worthwhile having some ordinance on there and someone going around and checking, because then you can justify it. But the juice is not worth the squeeze in trying to make some large enforcement process for 24 parking spaces. The last thing I'm going to say is number 5 is that we're talking about the downtown business owners. There's a limit to what we can do in government. Okay, what we can do to try to help this. And I think we're taking a step forward, which is what Pat brought up before. But I also expect the downtown businesses to step up, okay? And then to create I know they're doing this some, but to encourage them and to support them in this. But to make sure that the owners of all these businesses recognize that they have a responsibility to play a part in here. And this is, I don't know what the name of the Downtown Business Association is, if it's a guild.
Pinehurst Business Partners.
Pinehurst Business Partners, okay. But there's a long history of government teaming up with business partnerships to get change, and this is one where we need their help. We can't solve this all on our own. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Jeff. But I think what you're saying, Jeff, is we have a role here. We have some issues to deal with, but we have a role to play. Is that, I couldn't quite hear all you were saying, but that's.
Yeah, maybe I'm too close to the microphone. Yes, I believe that we have a role, which is what we're playing right now. I don't think that this is going to be the complete solution to it, and I don't think we are going to be able to cost effectively come up with a complete solution from a government standpoint.
Well said. Thank you, all of you, for that. I think I know a little bit now about how the tone of this letter might go with some of the changes that have been discussed here. And woven into that is the continuing issue of enforcement, which we've raised for some time. But at least in my view, we have a need to make a try, or maybe as Jeff was saying, to play a role in this process, but to get the business partners and the landlords, and I think Jeff Batten and I have talked about this for some time. We need to engage the business community in all of its forms, shapes, and sizes to be involved, to be informed about this, and to be involved, and to get as many as we can to buy into this, which was why I asked the question, I think, a little earlier about the rollout time. We have some time, I think, to work with our businesses, our landlords, everyone that's affected in the community, because there's going to be several weeks here before the sign, however the wording works out, can be ordered and delivered. Is that right, Jeff?
Yeah, it's primarily the posts, those particular materials, the post and all, the base at the bottom and the finial, that whole outfit. But it'll just take a little time for those materials to be produced and sent to us.
Somewhere, I don't know if it was which Jeff it was, but it said it might be 8 weeks.
I said up to 8 weeks
Kind of like a
of
long
shipping.
period of time, but I just.
All depends on, what supply chain is like these days.
But it's worthwhile. We can plan if 8 weeks back,
Yeah, and they could be here in 4 weeks. I mean, if they've got the materials in-house, then it may not be as lengthy, but.
May I ask a question, just from a practical point of view? I remember, Kat, when I met with you guys last summer, and you had said you guys were put in a difficult position. If you saw a shop owner parking where they shouldn't, they didn't want to be the ones to have to call out a fellow shop owner.
Right.
So I think it's important to discuss what are they to do when they see a fellow shop owner not complying. I guess at the time I said, did you call the police? Well, the police can't do anything because everybody has a right to park out there. And we don't have to decide now, but it seems like from a practical point, we need to be able to tell them, give them some guidance in what they should do. Is there somebody here that, what are they going to do when they see violators? What do we tell them to do? What do they want to do?
What would you tell a neighbor? I mean, if your neighbor's
They
doing
didn't want to
something.
be. They didn't want to be put in the position of having to go to a fellow shop owner and say, "Don't do that."
Okay, I understand what you're saying. They don't want to be put in the position for that. But they're coming to the council and they're asking us to solve the problem. And what I'm saying is, from what I'm seeing right now, The only real solution is just what Jim Nash said. There's got to be an enforcement process for the government to be able to do this. That's the only tool we have. That is cost prohibitive. I don't think it's appropriate for 24 spaces to have police going around there the whole time or try to put in machines or whatever the case is that's been proposed.
I agree. I completely agree with
Okay?
you.
So now we're left with a situation where we are trying to enforce it. We don't have a whole lot of enforcement mechanisms from a government standpoint, but they, when they're sitting right there beside it, and they're saying, hey, come on, man, you just parked in a place that's where all my customers could have been. All right, to ask them to do that, I think is a reasonable ask.
And
What
I think,
about a,
Jeff, go ahead.
spitballing here, but what about a reminder letter from the village? So, I mean, treat it almost like a soft code enforcement deal where, you know, we can take it
I think-
through my VOP as an anonymous
Yeah,
complaint or something, and
I think that's,
it generates a reminder letter from the village saying, hey, I just want to remind you that we have this program in place. We're trying to benefit all of our downtown businesses, and we sure would like your cooperation.
right. I think that, and I think that would be maybe more successful, that kind of follow-up letter, Jeff. I think all of this would be more successful, including that reminder letter, if we do go out, as we were all just talking, and start to educate all of our businesses and landlords over the next coming weeks before the signs actually go up. Because in fact, right now, you know, there is a program in the village, and there are signs there, you know, retail parking. But we need to remind people about that and make sure that they understand that village government is trying to do its part and playing a role in this, and to encourage them to abide by good practices and the good neighbor policy, or however you want to say
Yeah, and the downtown business partners discussed at their meeting, and
Right.
I assume they have a consensus on that. They want to protect those parking spaces. And they bring that forward and say, listen, it's the expectation amongst us. It's a guild. I mean,
Yeah,
we've
there are
had-
businesses downtown that don't participate in Pinehurst Business Partners,
That's right.
so they're
Not
outside of that
everybody is
loop.
a part of that, but
Yeah, I just want to let you know, that sounds like it ought to work, but the reality is, the Pinehurst Business Partners Group is a group of some of the businesses downtown, and not
enough.
all of them.
And other businesses that aren't
The
downtown.
ones who don't want to participate with them are the ones who don't want. And they have in the past tried to say politely to a fellow, you know, somebody who's maybe in one of the offices on the second floor or whatever, who's parking right in front of their store, would you mind please parking somewhere else, because you're parking here all day, every day, and that means that space is not available for my customers ever. And they get a very unpleasant responses. And I mean, when I say very, I mean very.
And these are
So-
the very people who move the signs.
It doesn't actually work in real life. So they're asking for our help because they've tried and not been able. It's not like they're just
Well,
wandering around not trying.
I think this is a good first step.
Yeah.
Okay? We shouldn't talk ourselves out of, oh, we can't do this or it won't work. We should try it. And I would also suggest that we should maybe look for a couple of times in the year, and I'm thinking of on the eve of a major event like US Open or on the Christmas shopping season, where there's a reminder letter from the mayor. You know, things are going well, please, as a reminder, blah, blah, blah. So they know that it's important to the council, and they're sort of being watched with a small W, because we're not going to go around with a, siren to do this.
I think we could take some advice, too, from talking to business partners, even though they don't represent all of the communities, but we also know other shopkeepers who may not be part of the BPB, but they're active, they know what we want to do, and they'll hear from us on that. So I think, as I've mentioned for some months, when we first set up this pilot program 2 years ago, we need to do more education. We haven't done much to date for a variety of reasons, but I think this offers us the opportunity to have that interchange with the shop owners and the landlords and go on from there.
Should we open this up to all of the parking spaces on the Chinkopin Marketplace or whatever, Market Square?
Take one street and make it only,
A couple of streets, yeah, and make them,
well, the 24 spaces, Jeff, are going to be scattered around, right? I mean, Maybe we need to make it 50 spaces.
Well, no, I'm
At the
wondering the
last
same
time when
thing.
we had that discussion,
Yeah.
I had presented, I think, two just random options, honestly. But yeah, the 24 spaces that y'all agreed to use this particular map
Right.
does spread out those spaces, some on, Market, some on Chiquapin, some on Cherokee. So they're kind of moved around, if you will, or spread out across the village.
Yeah, Jeff made the observation earlier, and I agree with him that with that limited number of parking spaces that are protected or reserved, our chances are pretty good with regard to compliance. But the higher that number goes,
Yeah, that's a good
the
point.
lower our compliance is going to get, because people are just, they're not going to buy in.
Good point. There's a
How many fixed parking spaces are there downtown taking out the sand lot?
Say again, Lydia, how many spaces that?
How many parking spaces are downtown when you take out the sand lot?
If my memory is somewhat correct, and I'm not going to say that it is, I think we're in the neighborhood of 260. Now,
so we're
that
just-
includes, I'm going to say this also, that includes some of the areas that are not specifically marked where people do park. So we do not have marked parking on Magnolia Road down behind Jim Nash's Duneberry store, coming down the street. But people park there every day. People park every day around the other side of the library going down Village Green East, but they are not marked spaces. So we kind of have a rough estimate about how many cars that will fit in those areas, and so kind of have I include those numbers in there. But there's about 100 spaces roughly in the sand lot or the Village Green lot.
I just wondered 24 is enough.
So
but
it's
if
really only
Jeff's-
about 10% that we're setting aside. If your number of total spaces is almost 300.
But there are 10% that are clustered in the business area.
Right.
And so
Is that,
if we took all of those other parking areas out, we're probably, and we looked at just this core portion of Market Square, Chinquapin, and Cherokee, coming down beside the old department store building and down by the roast office and theater building, we would be at a higher percentage if we eliminated.
That's
Because
true.
there's parking up Magnolia Road,
Right.
going towards the spa, there's like 19 spaces up there. And there's spaces that we lease in the Maples building parking lot behind the theater building. I mean, so I haven't done that count to determine what that percentage would actually be, but it's going to be higher than 10%
Yeah.
in that confined area.
Yeah, to Jeff Morgan's point about buy-in from the merchants, and then to Catherine's point about they don't want to have to rat on their neighbor, is there some place, can we get frequent input from Planters Business Partners about constant violators? Would it help enforcement if we know who the constant violators are? I mean, I'm just,
Probably, and I think we may know that already, but also Jane is our liaison to the Pinehurst Business Partners meeting, so that allows you not just to wait for those meetings, but you could assist with
That's what
that.
I was suggesting, is we set it up right in my VOP for,
I think we got to be
for
careful.
anonymous or non-anonymous complaints, depending on how the adjoining or neighboring business owner wants to deal with the situation, but they can log it in there, and we have a form letter. That's just a friendly reminder that goes out to those business owners that are perceived to be part of the problem.
so, go ahead, Patrick.
I don't want us to get into the fashion where we have one business tattling on another because they're not parking correctly. We're dealing with adults here. These are business professionals. They have money invested in their shops, and they are literally next door to one another all day long. So I would avoid any, sort of tattletale group. I much more prefer that book Nudge. We can nudge people along and see how it works under what we're proposing, rather than go into a
Pat, I think, yeah, nudging along and moving in the direction is one thing, but there may be some who don't mind using my VOP, and as Jeff points out, it's an anonymous, if they want to do that.
Their
that's-
choice,
That's
that's
another
right,
way,
yeah,
but
yeah.
there are lots of ways we can get the idea out there and enforce the fact that we're trying to help do
And
the right thing.
the person who's being reminded doesn't need to know where it came from, other than it came from the Village of Pinehurst.
Right.
Well, and if they don't want to use my VOP, and I understand what everybody's saying, but if we have, you know, sometimes it's the realtors, it's the bank, I'm not calling them out, but it's people who don't have shops, who might have some professional service down there, who aren't that impacted by people coming in the door to shop all day long.
Yeah.
And if we find a constant pattern of violation by those, I want Pinehurst Business Partners to know that we're going to help them somehow with it, whether it's my VOP or whatever, that we've gone this far, what can we do to identify who we need to continue to nudge?
Yeah, yeah, and that's something we just have never done. Hopefully, we will start to do that now. Other comments or direction? I think there may be some issues about exactly the way the sign reads, which is going to always be a tough assignment, Jeff. We're pretty much there, but there have been some good suggestions.
Yeah, I like the word reserve, but reserve for means we have to put dining, shopping, visiting,
Keep
to
it
make
short
the,
and simple, right?
and
Reserve
we
two.
steered away.
Reserve two.
Reserve to dine shop visit.
Yeah,
why
and
not?
that's the only thing I was going to say, if y'all are okay with it being reserved too, because it doesn't quite sound right to me, reserve to dine, shop, and visit, but it's better than putting dining, shopping, and visiting on that sign. It was getting, we tried that, and we did, it's just too wordy, and it's not easily read, and that's fairly simple right there. Changing park here to reserved is simple to do, and as long as we're okay with reserved to dine, shop, visit,
I'm fine with that.
all right.
What's, since it's already awkward, why did you say reserved for dine, shop, visit?
Or just reserved dine shop visit. Get the point
Whatever y'all
across.
think, I was never very good in English.
You did a
Not
great
my
job
strong-
getting to here. You'll come up
I
with
like
something
two.
I
good.
think I made
Anyway.
more than a C at any one point in my life.
I think Mr. Morgan had another comment. Jeff, Mr. Morgan, were you trying to make another comment, sir?
Last comment on there is that I certainly think that the signs is a good first step in trying to work with this and working with our business partners. If someone comes up with a cost-effective method of enforcement, I'm all ears. But at this
Sure.
point in time, I'm not hearing that.
Okay, okay. All right. Have we provided enough of a direction and consensus then?
Yeah,
Jeff, Matt?
I think changing the sign to reserve to dine, shop, or visit, or reserved for. I'll look to my editor-in-chief over there whenever I do something out. And then I've got the directions. I think everybody was in agreement with Lydia's wordsmithing. What I would do then is I'll make those changes, and we do want to include the sign,
Yeah.
this map, right? I'll make those changes and I'll just send it back out to everyone, and y'all can then relay.
And then
to
we'll think
your-
through, okay, when do I go and talk to some of the landlords? When do I go and talk to some of the shopkeepers? And when I say I, I'm talking about me, but enlisting the aid of the village council members here as they're able.
Why don't I do this tomorrow? I can get on the phone with Brandon Industries, who will produce the post. That's the holdup.
Yeah.
That's going to be the slow part. Let me get an idea of what kind of lead time that they're considering right now, or what they have in the works for that. Once I have that time frame, then I can say, look, they're thinking it's going to be here, and we should have them in 6 weeks, and then we can back from there into 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, whatever y'all kind of think is appropriate at that point.
And again, would
For-
like the.
for visiting before.
I'm assuming we'll get the participation of as many of the council members as can to come out and be part of this, go up, talk to people. Once we get the letter ready and everything's announced, go and talk.
No more than 2 of you at one time.
We'll watch that, yeah, we'll watch that. Okay, anything else for Jeff Batten on this issue, council? No. Jeff, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
I think we're making good progress. Thank you for your good work. All right, we have another item on the agenda. Flags and placements. You're going to talk to us about that, and I have some input on that once you've.
Good. I think the memo is fairly clear that this is just a time for us to get your feelings on whether you want to establish a policy related to the flying of any type of commemorative flag below a U.S. flag for any particular special occasion, or whether requests for banners on lampposts are something that you would want to entertain, either on a case-by-case basis, or whether we want to establish a policy so that some of those could be headed off, if you will, at the staff level.
We're
We
talking
currently
about
do-
private party requests, right?
We have a private party request that has come in, and that's kind of where it has spurred. These don't come up often. The last time that we had any non-village particular banners or flags that I can recall is the 2014 U.S. Open, and that was working in conjunction with the USGA to put up for the U.S. Open experience downtown. Those were banners on the lamppost. So we're just now coming around and having another request, but I could see with some of the more larger special events and things that are on the horizon for Pinehurst, there could be more requests coming our way to allow someone to fly a commemorative flag for barbecue festival or whatever, Sandhills Motoring Festival for the car show, whatever the case may be. It could be anything. Shakespeare in the Pines. We don't have any policy that dictates, yeah, we'll allow it, no, we won't. And really just wanted to get a feel from y'all, is this something you want to say, hey, we'll just stay away from that altogether? That'll be our policy. It'll be, no, we do not allow those, except for village-sponsored or village-related, activity. If you think there are times, during a major event or something that you would want to do so, then I think we need to develop a policy that is more in-depth to very clearly and objectively be able to be enforced by staff for that. So with that, I will.
Yeah. I think the issue is in two parts. Flagpoles where we fly the American flag, and then the banner issue, which is a whole different side of it from my point of view. And Mike brought to my attention about a week ago, this request. I don't think there's any reason we shouldn't mention the request.
I would prefer that we
No,
not.
we don't. Okay, fine. That's fine. My feeling is this. I think we should not fly from the flagpoles in Pinehurst, where we fly the American flag, any other kind of flag or banner, unless it relates to a U.S. or state of North Carolina flag. I may want to amend that as I talk along. But the point is, I don't think we should fly from the flagpoles that have the American flag, any other kind of banner or publicity, no matter how temporary it is. We did supply, as you said, Jeff, use of our poles in Pinehurst for the U.S. Open, and I think that's great. We've got Olmsted and Ross there now, and we can use those in good ways all across the village, I think. But I think we should abide by the I think federal regulations on flying the American flag, which is that it should be on its own pole. It should be the largest flag or banner on the pole and above all others, and everything else is lesser than that. Now, there are some situations where I think we have flown the North Carolina flag on the flagpole here at Village Hall, and probably at the roundabout, and maybe in the core village. I'm not sure I have that
Yeah,
correct
I think
yet.
we have flown the state flag
We are currently doing that, actually, on
in many
several of the.
locations. And we have a
poles that the
number
village
of
uses.
flagpoles, many of which are on village property for, in front of the public services, police and fire. The primary public ones are really well, I guess I would say the one here, but The one that's in the center of downtown, and then the one at that small roundabout there on NC2 are really your probably two most prominent locations that someone would probably have an interest in trying to make a request for.
So, other comments from council on this issue?
Flagpoles, then, would say the U.S. flag and the North Carolina flag. Agree. I think Jane was nodding. So now that it's just,
The county
What?
doesn't have a flag, does it, or does it?
The county, it probably has a flag with its seal on it, but I don't recall it, and I don't think we've
County
found it.
seal, whether
Yeah.
they produce a flag that they display with it or not, but there's not really
Yeah.
place for official county flags.
Yeah,
Pat?
yeah, I agree with the flagpole should be for the American flag and where appropriate, the North Carolina state flag. And as far as the posts, I think we should reserve it to our events. If it's a Pinehurst, the barbecue, or the, whatever it is, that's fine. I just don't think we should go beyond what Pinehurst is officially doing. I don't want.
Events that we sponsor.
Yes, if that's the
That
proper
for
word.
use of the
Sequential
banners.
response.
Or
I don't wanna
or
get into-
co-sponsor, right? Or co-sponsor as well,
I guess, I don't know
yeah.
if what that.
As long as
makes
we
a
have
difference.
some official role in the,
Yeah, if we,
yeah.
yes, then it's our lamppost. So,
Yeah.
yes, we have an official role, but I just don't think we should open it up to everybody who wants to come forward and say, geez, I'd like us to fly this flag. And we will be endlessly subjected to lots of things, some that might be awkward
and you get into First Amendment issues.
not worth the
Yeah.
time and, yeah.
I'd like to, make clarification, I guess, on the banners on the flag poles, or excuse me, lamp posts, banners on lamp posts. If I understand your point, Pat, was you're okay with something that the village is involved in. Now, we are,
Officially involved in, yeah.
yeah, there are a number of events that we are a co-sponsor of that people may not realize that we are. I'll use Shakespeare in the Pines, for example. If they wanted to put banners on the lamppost, is that something that we have interest in? So I just want to make sure that we understand that we do have involvement in U.S. Open, a national and an international recognized event. Shakespeare in the Pines, which is they do a great program, and I think they add a whole lot to the community. I wish we could use them. I wish they'd do more plays, honestly, downtown. But is that of a level of significance that we would want to be investing our staff time in putting these up and taking them down? And
I think
that's
maybe we
not-
need to say that it has to be at our request, not at, in other words, it has to be significant enough that the village of Pinehurst wants to promote this event.
I don't know why
using
we
that.
want to go here. I really don't know what it adds to an event. I think it's a slippery slope. I mean, where do you draw the line? Again, when I first looked at this, I thought, well, do we have free speech issues here? Like we say yes to somebody, but not yes, say no to somebody else. And then does that just get us, what are we gaining by doing this? And what are the risks by getting into it? And I think the risks are just too great. And you just have staff time in putting them up. That's not a risk, but that's a cost. And I just
and
don't
it's a
know.
significant amount of time.
But I just don't know what we gain and what the events gain by, I mean, look at the barbecue festival last year. It was a huge success without banners on the lamppost. The car shows downtown. I don't think they need these things on the lamppost, so why do we want to do this? Why do we want to engage in this?
Yeah, and I don't know that we would ever get those requests, but if they begin to appear for one event, we will likely be getting more and more requests for them, potentially. So we just wanted to try to be prepared for that inevitable request that probably will come at some point. I think we've got our clear direction on the flag poles. I'm not sure I'm 100% clear on the lamp post.
Yeah, I think it's unanimous on the flagpoles. on the lamppost, if we go that direction, I think that even, we're talking things we're sponsoring, co-sponsoring, that kind of stuff, but whomever is running the event needs to pay for it. And so you're talking the banners, they're paying for it, the staff time, they're paying for it, the putting it up, they're paying for it, taking down, they're paying for it. There should not be a cost on us.
Right.
From my perspective.
And I think
Okay.
that would probably be sufficient for the majority of the people to back off.
That's right. So it'll be a market type thing. So I don't think that the barbecue festival is going to say it's worthwhile. The barbecue will
He's
bring
got
people,
enough
not
on his
the
hands
banners.
during the barbecue festival to worry about, yes, I would agree.
Now, the U.S. Open probably saying, hey,
Right.
let's put some stuff up.
Yeah, and that time, when we did the US Open, it was sort of a joint venture, if you will. I mean, we were directly involved in that US Open experience, and it was, hey, let's do this. US Open, USGA actually did the designs, but we approved them. And in fact, they first put up, they were too small. The first one went up, we said, oh, that doesn't look right, and called the folks with USGA and said, come take a look at this. We don't think, yeah, they agreed, so made a quick change and went on our way, but.
Well, bottom line, my recommendation is that anything that we authorize on that, it's borne, the expense is borne by whomever's asking for it. Okay, that it has to be sponsored, co-sponsored,
We
I agree.
sponsor, we approve, and they pay the bill.
and they pay.
Yeah,
Everything.
we approve and they pay. Now, this, what you just suggested may solve the issue in my mind, but it's something I'd like to consider, and that is that, I'm picking up on Lydia's comment here, from a beautification point of view and a look of the village point of view, we want to control those flagpoles, those lampposts, and have what we want to be there. And most of the year, it's going to be flower baskets and things that are changed, what now, 2-3 times a year, Jeff? Twice. And not have that affected by a banner every month or even every couple of weeks. So I'm pretty conservative on the use of the posts, unless we approve it and the other party pays for it, which tells me that that's going to be pretty significant events where there's an overriding need to do something unique. And it doesn't take away from the look of the village most of the time.
And the standards clause that says it has to be appropriate and of good taste and
We'll
Look and
approve it.
content we
Yeah.
would govern.
Oh,
yeah.
now you're regulating content.
And I was just gonna add, that history tells us we don't get many of these requests, so.
Very few.
Yeah.
Well, look, Jeff Patton just said, you get one, then you might get another one, you might get another one, but I don't think we can regulate the content of what goes up there.
Well, we can if we're sponsoring.
Yeah, and that's our, yeah, I think the way this would work, we would have control of that in an appropriate way without,
We don't like your banner, we pull our sponsorship. And then you can't have your banner up either, anyway, so yes, we can.
And you have to pay for your banner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Yes. I'm fine.
is that all right, Mr. Batten?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Any other input for Jeff on this subject? I think this is a good discussion, something we need to have.
Yeah, I
as a
think
policy.
it is good. I just want to get out ahead of it. We had the one request that spurred some thought and discussion on specifically flagpoles, but we expanded it to also include lamp posts, knowing that, those could be coming into play and requests could be made, so. We may, Jeff, I'll talk to you, but we may come back with a very brief council policy on this that y'all would adopt that'll lay out what you
Shouldn't take much.
direction you've given us, yeah. Half a page, if that.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Mike, good to hear from you tonight. Okay, we're going on into other work session business. We have a couple of points I think some of us want to make. For me, I'll just say, with respect to the Marshall nomination letter, that's been, as you know, that's been sent. I'm going to be forwarding that to our state representatives and to our state, that meeting Mr. Bowles, Mr. McGinnis, also to our congressmen and to our senators. And the historian involved here, David Roll, has contacts with the Army Times. and those publications that are in the military. And he'll, a story about that will be in those at some future date. I'll try to get you that information. So that's progressing along in a decent way, and hopefully we'll have some success. I think, Pat, you had one or two things you wanted to raise?
Yes, I did. We had a brief email exchange, I think it was yesterday, on the idea of the identification of those folks who are on our advisory boards and commissions. And I raised the issue simply because I went to one and went home to look up the names of these people, and they weren't listed. So that was the entire nucleus of that concept. And I had suggested that we put their bios up. I actually suggested that before, not knowing their names weren't really up. So, and I guess there may be some hesitation about that, so I'm not interested at this point of sort of litigating whether or not their bio should be up there. I personally think I know if I was going to go on an advisory committee, one of the things I would like to do is look up the people who are on it and see what their backgrounds are like, so I wouldn't make an idiot out of myself by applying for something. And I know in the federal government, the names are listed and you can go find the person's bio. But at a minimum, I think we should put all our advisory committee members' names up there so their fellow citizens know who they are. And if they're thinking themselves about doing something, they can contact them. And maybe in a few months, we can revisit the idea of bios. Because I do understand there's, sort of a privacy issue to this a little bit. But we are a community where volunteers are so important. We have luncheons for volunteers. We celebrate them. We try to encourage people to join these advisory boards. And my experience is that everyone I know that is on one has a very impressive background and resume once I find out who they are and talk to them and learn about them. So I would like us to go forward with that. And if there's some reason not to, I'd like to figure out why.
I don't think there's any reason to object to putting the names of all of our advisory board members on the website. And with regard to bios, I mean, it may be a good, I mean, who knows? Maybe if you do it, it winds up being a best practice. But maybe a useful approach would be to survey our
What would they put
current
up?
board members. What do you think about this idea?
I mean, I don't want to know their SAT scores or their golf handicap, but it'd be nice to know that they've come to Pinehurst, 15 years ago, and they had a career in X industry, and you'd see something that says, oh, wow, that's a good fit. That's why they're on there. They've got an MBA in finance or something. But anyway, so I don't need to make a motion, but that's what I would advocate.
Yeah, I think putting the names up. And I couldn't recall, Jeff, if there had ever been any discussion of that before, and maybe some pushback about doing that.
Never come
I
up.
didn't recall it at all.
Yeah.
It just hadn't happened. So I'm certainly in favor of putting the names up there and other information. Let's see what happens. But
Yeah, we
how do
can-
the rest of you feel about
Mhm.
that? And so council's favorable about that, and maybe we'd talk through some of the planning board and historic commission and beautification commission if there's any pushback. Okay.
The other two items were really questions, and maybe Jeff probably may know the answer. One has to do, you mentioned that there was a minor contract dispute that you settled with Design Collective, and I
Yeah,
didn't
it's
quite,
just-
what was that?
Just interpretation of contract language about whether something have been covered
Oh.
under the base contract, or we should have been charged on an hourly rate.
Okay.
It was not big dollars.
Very minor then, what you're saying, okay. Second issue, I noticed driving up and down the area here, there were a couple of like construction-like vehicles parked at not precisely the corner of Rattlesnake and McCaskill, but a little in.
At our lot down there.
Yeah, and so I got thinking, what are they doing? And I know we have a moratorium in place, and I guess we've had one for some time, but these things, they usually park those near where they're going to take some action. So I was wondering what that's about.
Saw the same thing, and my assumption was it was related to the resurfacing work.
Okay. I'll accept that. I don't know anything,
Anything else?
No, that's it. Right, thank you.
Lydia, any other points?
That's we own that lot.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
so we use it for things like that. when
that's
we
right.
have
That's
work going on.
the land that we swapped.
Yes.
That's the land we swapped with the
Well-
county for, or part of that,
Um,
or is it next to that? It's right on
Yes,
Rattlesnake.
we swapped for that, yes.
Is Rattlesnake going to be resurfaced, or is it,
No.
no,
Could
it's
be.
somewhere else?
Magnolia was one of them, though.
Just a place to
Yeah.
put the equipment.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lydia, additional?
Thank you, John. I saw these proclamations, and it brought to mind, well, actually, I came prepared for this. In my monthly Olmsted Network open exchanges, they talked about trying to get proclamations out of municipalities, which we hope we could do, but also out of your state. And I recall last week when Dee Dee was here, she showed a map of all of the Olmsted properties in North Carolina. Do y'all remember seeing that? Because I tried to find the map today online, and I couldn't. But then, here's your history lesson. In this Olmsted book, this is very cool. Olmsted, as we know, did the gardens at Biltmore. And he said, during his third leg of his southern travels, the journey through the backcountry, Olmsted had spent an entire month meandering through the forest of North Carolina. This is a quote: "There is no experience of my life to which I could return with more satisfaction." So Olmsted said that about the forest around Biltmore, but I thought he was here, he was Biltmore, and I don't know what else, but it seems like this stuff is appropriate for a state proclamation.
Yeah.
A General Assembly, and then if they could get it to the governor, that's better, but we're running out of time. And I don't mind drafting it, it's just, I would, of course, they would like for us to do one.
Yeah, well, and that was one of my follow-up points with Doug, who's sitting in the back, but we hadn't talked about it. So I thought they had a draft proclamation for a town, and we can just use that.
Well, they did a draft, but it's appropriate, I looked at it a month ago, it's appropriate for a town, or at first they said they would like a governor to do it. But I hadn't
Well,
focused.
let's get it going at our level, and then we'll see what could happen. But if
This
there's a
was
draft,
this was very cool,
Yeah.
in his old age, that he felt no place more satisfaction than with the forest of North Carolina. But I emailed Dee Dee to ask her if she could show me where that map is, because if Olmsted was involved in several properties all over North Carolina, that would make a state proclamation obviously more reasonable and more appropriate.
I think the draft
Proclamation.
amended proclamation is on the Homestead 200 website.
Okay,
We
and
can get that there, and with Doug and Kelly, whatever, we can get a proclamation.
Dee Dee sent
together.
it to me, and then I think I sent it to Doug. but-
Okay, well, if he has it, then we'll work from that.
Okay, and if I hear back from Dee Dee and I can find the other properties in North Carolina, then maybe we can, get something McGinnis and Bowles, and they might even get, what's our governor's name? Roy Cooper to do something.
Okay? All right. Jane, did you have anything else to add? Jeff? Okay. I have one other. We had some emails about our short-term rental regulations and writing to the Senate committee to express the fact that we're putting together a policy, and I don't see any reason we can't do that. Jeff and I will develop a letter and show it to you and get it off. Good? Okay. Those are the only other items I had. Anything else from council? Then is there a motion to recess the work session and enter a closed session?
I move to recess the work session and enter a closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-1311A5, to establish or to instruct the public body staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body in negotiating the price and other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property by purchase, option, exchange, or lease.
That's a motion by Lydia Bosch. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second by Jane Hogeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll move to the closed session as soon as the technical